What's up everyone, I'm Thinker, and this is the Thinkertoons channel. Today, we're going to take a look at a very emotional, interesting episode of The Amazing World of Gumball, which talks about the terrible relationship between Nicole and her parents, because of a past where she suffered a lot due to the upbringing and childhood she had, while her parents considered her ungrateful for not understanding that they wanted to turn her into a winner. Nicole, on the other hand, considered them horrible parents, because of the crazy way they tried to achieve that, which caused many problems in her life. This episode also speaks a lot about how holding on to grudges and resentment, in the end, only hurts yourself, and in a simple way, teaches about certain burdens in life that we can choose not to carry. The episode begins with Nicole at the supermarket, stopping the other family members from putting candy in the cart. Shortly after, she explains that they can't buy these things because she was working in an unhappy, exploitative job that paid her pennies, literally pennies. In a comedic, exaggerated way, Nicole represented a lot of people, and it was clear how dissatisfied she was with life, with many problems bothering her, yet she was still managing to handle it all, at least for the moment. As if that weren't enough, she gets caught off guard when she runs into her parents at the supermarket by chance. The fact that she hadn't spoken to them in 20 years meant that any unresolved conflicts and grievances between them had grown immensely bigger, more delicate, and complex to address. Often, time doesn't heal anything. Sometimes, it just accumulates. At some point, there's no way around it, and we'll have to deal with things that have become more painful and complicated than they seemed before. Naturally, Nicole didn't want anything to do with having her parents at her house, as it was easy to associate avoidance with self-protection, and a conversation would bring up things she wanted to leave behind. But that's the thing, a conversation could also help those things truly stay behind. However, now it wasn't up to her, since her kids invited their grandparents over for a visit. This scene is one of those moments that highlights how The Amazing World of Gumball is a sensational show. Richard is talking to a canned meat product they bought, and everything he says, Nicole thinks is directed at her, as the questions coincidentally align perfectly with their situation, making it seem like Richard was being understanding and trying to help. He asks the can why it doesn't open up, and Nicole responds that there were many things between her and her parents, and time had only made everything harder. He then asks the meat why it's so tough inside, and Nicole replies that maybe it was just her way of protecting herself and avoiding further hurt. In the end, she agrees to give it a chance and be less closed off about her relationship with her parents. All because of what Richard said, without even realizing he was acting like a psychologist. When everyone arrives home, the atmosphere is obviously tense due to the disagreements, and all those bad feelings they've been harboring towards each other over the years. Still, none of them wanted to be the first to talk about it. Gumball then decides to crack a joke to lighten the mood, but he ends up making things worse, giving way to a huge argument where no one is really listening to the other, they're just shouting their bad feelings. Darwin then suggests that both sides talk about the grudges they held against each other, so they could figure out who was in the right, which sounds like a good idea. Nicole starts by talking about how her parents always seemed disappointed in her, as it was impossible for her to meet their bizarre expectations, which made it seem like they forgot she was a person and not a winning machine, always needing to take first place and be perfect. The fact that they had registered her first name as Doctor clearly showed how this pressure started very early on. And while it's okay for parents to want their child to be successful, this is actually one of the most common things in the world, isn't it? What parent doesn't want their child to do well in life, right? But in this case, it was something that said much more about their own satisfaction and happiness than Nicole's. It was also something stimulated in a completely insane, toxic, and destructive way, placing enormous pressure and the weight of the world on a child's shoulders, forcing her to overload her mind with all kinds of activities at once. This greatly harmed Nicole's childhood and consequently her adult life, affecting her mental health and creating a feeling of revolt and injustice that ultimately destroyed their relationship. In the end, this discussion makes the narcissism of Nicole's parents very clear, their belief that it was impossible for them to be wrong. And how can you argue with someone who always thinks they're right? You can't, can you? They saw themselves as the best, and thought Nicole needed to be better than everyone else too. To counter the things Nicole was saying, they pointed out some of the trouble she caused due to her anger issues. But honestly, it would have been surprising if she didn't turn out like that, given the terrible example she had at home. As we've seen before, her father also had anger problems and never hesitated to express them in front of his daughter. And about their dislike of Richard, fine, there were reasons for that. Richard did give them reasons. But the problem begins when they failed to understand that this wasn't their decision to make, it was Nicole. Nicole's, and that was something that, at the very least, deserved respect. It was impossible and wrong for them to try and control every little detail of her life. Nicole and her parents then start justifying the bad things they did to each other by saying it was only because of something bad the other had done first. It got a lot more confusing than I expected, but I think you get the point. They go back and forth like this for a while, until they reach a point where they simply don't remember where it all started, or even why they were provoking each other. They lose sight of the point of it all. At this moment, Nicole decides it's better to stop trying to rebuild that relationship. It was too painful and seemed impossible at that point. She says it would be better to continue living separately, as they were before, carrying all that resentment. Then we get to the part of the episode that, I must admit, made me cry. Gumball starts singing a very beautiful little song, while the scene shows Nicole's parents slowly walking away from her life forever. You can clearly see how heartbroken her parents were in that moment, but their pride still made it hard for them to let go, apologize, and acknowledge that they had been wrong, that they could have done so many things differently. In this way, everyone continued carrying the enormous weight of their resentment towards each other, which would only poison them gradually. This scene shows that, despite all the fights, all the bad behavior, all the anger and resentment, deep down, way deep down, there was still some love there. There was still something, and it's completely understandable that Nicole would think pursuing that feeling wasn't worth it, considering everything her parents had done. But again, it was her choice, whether to give them a chance, believe that they could change and things could be better, or to cut those ties once and for all. In the end, her parents decide to come back to apologize. They hit the brakes on the car, just in time to avoid colliding with a truck speeding past. In my opinion, this symbolizes how letting go of all that pride, resentment, and anguish prevented them from being destroyed.